My name is Eleanor Hartley. I'm 38 years old. 22 years ago, my parents threw me out of our family home for falling pregnant in year 11. 17 years old. A November downpour, one battered hold-all, and my mother standing in the doorway with her arm outstretched, pointing me into the dark. That same night, they had a solicitor draw up papers removing me from the family entirely. Me and any child I might ever bring into the world. I kept those papers. I have kept everything. For more than 2 decades, I was invisible to them. They told their social circle I'd gone traveling, built their spotless reputation on the grave of the daughter they discarded. Then last week, they appeared at my front door, desperate, all smiles, demanding to meet their grandson. A grandson they'd been boasting about for months to 200 of their most influential acquaintances. They offered me £250,000. What they hadn't realized was that the grandson they'd been promising, everyone simply didn't exist, and what they found instead would unravel everything they'd spent 50 years constructing. Manchester, November 2002. I was 17 in year 11 at St. Margaret's High School for Girls, and the youngest child of Jeffrey and Patricia Hartley. On paper, we were the perfect family. My father ran a well-regarded property law practice in the city center. Hartley and Associates, established 1989. My mother had chaired the school's Parents Association for 3 consecutive years and organized the church summer fete with military precision. Each Sunday, we filed into St. Edmund's Church in Didsbury in coordinated outfits my mother had laid out the night before. But every family has its unspoken hierarchy, and I understood mine from a very young age. Daniel, my eldest brother, was 24 and in his final year of dental training. He was the pride of the family, the son who would carry the Hartley name forward with distinction. Rebecca, 22, was studying at Leeds to become a secondary school teacher. Beautiful, obedient, and incapable of putting a foot wrong. And then there was me. My mother had once referred to me, in a moment she perhaps thought I couldn't hear, as her little afterthought. Born when she was 36, 7 years after she believed her family was complete. I don't think she ever truly forgave me for disrupting the neat life she'd arranged for herself. The signs were subtle, but relentless. Family portraits displayed in the hallway somehow never featured my most recent school photo. Dinner conversations revolved around Daniel's clinical placements or Rebecca's student teaching assessments. When I mentioned coming top of my English class, my father would look up briefly, say, "Very good, Ellie," and return his attention to Daniel without missing a beat. I learned to make myself small, to want less, to need less. My father had a phrase he trotted out at every family gathering, usually after his second glass of wine. Reputation takes 20 years to build and 5 minutes to destroy. I had no idea then how prophetic those words would become, or that I would be those 5 minutes he most feared. I met Jamie Caldwell at the Central Library on Deansgate. It sounds ordinary enough, but for me, the library was a refuge, a place where no one measured me against my siblings or reminded me of standards I could never quite meet. I went 3 afternoons a week, ostensibly to study, really just to breathe. Jamie attended the local comprehensive my parents would never acknowledge by name. He was 18, worked weekends at his uncle's garage in Holme, and had the warmest eyes I'd ever seen. He found me crying in the biography section one October afternoon after my mother had forgotten to collect me from school for the 4th time that term. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You all right?" Nobody had asked me that in a very long time. We saw each other in secret for 2 months. He was gentle and patient, and made me feel as though I actually mattered, like I was someone worth remembering. October the 30th, 2002. I will never forget standing in the cubicle of a petrol station toilet 3 miles from school, staring at the test in my shaking hands. 2 pink lines. My legs went to water. When I told Jamie, he didn't bolt. He didn't make excuses or go quiet. He took both my hands in his and said, "We'll sort this out together, Ellie. You're not going through this alone." I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But I knew my parents. I knew what they valued. And I knew that when I told them, their first question would not be, "Are you all right?" It would be, what will people think? I chose to tell them at Sunday dinner. I didn't know it would be the last meal I'd ever eat in that house. Sunday, November the 17th, 2002. 7:30 in the evening. The roast chicken was overdone. I remember that detail with odd precision, because I was staring at it, trying to summon the courage to speak, while my father complained about a boundary dispute with a client, and my mother calculated who from church would attend the Christmas drinks. My brother was home for the weekend. Rebecca had come up from Leeds. I need to tell you something. The table went silent. 4 faces turned toward me. I was 9 weeks pregnant, and I couldn't keep it hidden much longer. I'm pregnant. My mother's fork struck the rim of her plate. My father didn't move a muscle. When he finally spoke, his voice was as cold as February. Who is the father? Is it someone from the school? Someone we know? His name is Jamie Caldwell. He goes to Bridgewater Comprehensive. My mother's face had drained of all color. You've been seeing a boy from that school? He's a good person, Mum. What does his father do? My father asked, cutting in. He lives with his uncle. He works at a garage. The silence that followed lasted exactly 12 seconds. I counted every one of them. Then my father rose from his chair. You will not be keeping it. Jeffrey, my mother started. She will not destroy everything we have built. He looked at me the way you look at a stranger who has wandered into your home uninvited. Not as a daughter, as a problem that needed to be dealt with. If you keep that baby, you are no longer part of this family. By 9:30 that evening, I was standing on the front step with my hold-all November rain soaking through my school jumper. My mother had opened the door and pointed outside. Not my father, my mother. Daniel and Rebecca watched from the landing window. Neither of them came downstairs. I rang Jamie from the phone box at the end of the road. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the buttons. He picked up on the second ring. Ellie? What's wrong? They've thrown me out. 15 minutes later, his uncle's van pulled up alongside the curb. Jamie jumped out before it had properly stopped, wrapped his coat around my shoulders, and held me while I sobbed against his chest in the rain. I've got you, he said. I've got you. We had no plan. Between us, we had 240 pounds, a van with suspect brakes, and nowhere to go. That was when Margaret Delaney saved my life. She was our neighbor, 4 doors down from the Hartley house, 64 years old, a retired primary school teacher, and the only person on our road who didn't treat my father as though he owned the street. She'd seen me through her sitting room window. She'd watched long enough to understand what was happening. You can stay with me, she said when I knocked on her door at nearly 10 o'clock at night, as long as you need. 2 weeks. That's how long we stayed in Mrs. Delaney's spare room before Jamie found us a bedsit in Salford. 380 pounds a month, above a laundrette that smelled of bleach and someone else's hopes. My parents had their solicitor prepare documents the same night they threw me out. I know because my father posted me a copy 3 days later. Recorded delivery, signature required, as though I were a business matter to be filed and forgotten. The document stated that Eleanor Catherine Hartley hereby relinquished all inheritance rights, and that the Hartley family bore no legal or moral obligation to her, or to any child born to her. I kept that letter. I have kept it for 22 years. Poppy Grace Hartley Caldwell was born on the 6th of August, 2003, at Salford Royal Hospital. 7 pounds and 1 ounce, 10 fingers, 10 toes, her father's dark eyes, and my stubborn jaw. She came into the world screaming, and I thought, good, scream, make yourself heard. Don't ever let anyone reduce you to nothing. The first 5 years were a blur of pure survival. Jamie worked double shifts at a body repair shop in Eccles while I sat my GCSEs through the local college, then began A-levels 1 subject at a time, fitting them around Poppy's routine. We lived on pasta and reduced bread from the end-of-day trolley at the co-op down the road. I learnt to darn clothes until the darning outnumbered the original fabric. I sent my parents a card when Poppy was born. Nothing came back. I sent a photograph on her first birthday. Silence. By her second birthday, I stopped trying. Jamie and I never did get married. We kept saying we'd do it properly one day, when things settled down, when life was less precarious. One day kept getting pushed further away. Then on the 22nd of February 2008, a lorry jumped a red light on the Eccles New Road. Jamie was driving home from a late shift. The police officer who came to my door told me he died at the scene. He was 23 years old. Poppy was 4. The life insurance through his employer paid out £14,000. That was all. £14,000 for 23 years of a good man's life. I was 22 years old, a single mother with a 4-year-old daughter, £14,000, and absolutely no one to ring. I could have given up then. I didn't. I'd been doing small interiors projects whilst Jamie was alive, decorating flats for neighbors who couldn't stretch to professionals, helping estate agents stage properties when they were willing to take a chance on a young woman with no formal qualifications. People told me I had an instinct for it, a way of making cramped spaces feel like somewhere worth coming home to. After Jamie died, I threw myself into that work as though my life depended on it. Because it did. In 2010, I met Vivienne Cross at a design evening class at Manchester Metropolitan University. She was 54, recently stepped back from her role as creative director at a major London interiors firm, and quietly looking for a new project. For reasons I have never entirely understood, she chose me. "You have real talent," she said after looking through my portfolio. "Unpolished but completely genuine. Let me help you develop it." In 2012, with Vivienne's mentorship and a £45,000 startup loan that took me 4 attempts to secure, I founded Hearthside Interiors. Our first studio was a converted storeroom in a shared workspace above a cafe in Ancoats. By 2016, we had 9 members of staff, turnover just over £1 million. In 2020, Manchester Living magazine ran a long-form feature on me. The journalist spent 2 days interviewing me about my journey. The pregnancy at 17, being cut off from my family, losing Jamie, building something real from nothing. I told her everything except my parents' names, not to protect them. To protect Poppy from strangers drawing lines between her and people who had tried to erase her before she drew her first breath. By 2024, we had 24 members of staff. Annual turnover, £4.6 million. A corner office overlooking the northern quarter, with original artwork on the walls that I had chosen myself. My daughter was 21, in her second year studying psychology at the University of Manchester. Brilliant and fierce and everything I had dared to hope she might become. 22 years. No contact from the Hartley family. Until last week. Tuesday, November the 5th, 2024. 7:20 in the evening. I'd just returned from a client meeting, a tech entrepreneur renovating a Victorian townhouse in Altrincham, a contract worth just under £1 million. My mind was still running through fabric samples and skirting board profiles. I turned onto my street, saw the car, a black Mercedes-Benz, a South Manchester registration plate I didn't recognize, and my chest tightened. I parked and sat for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel, watching 2 figures standing at my front door. The man had gray hair now, a slight stoop to his shoulders. The woman still held herself with that rigid, carefully managed posture I remembered. A constant vigilance against anything that might disturb the world she'd constructed. Jeffrey and Patricia Hartley. My parents. I hadn't seen them in 22 years. I considered reversing out, driving to a Premier Inn, ringing Poppy, and pretending this wasn't happening. But I was 38 years old. I owned a company. I had built a life entirely without them. I was not going to run. I got out of the car and walked toward them. My father spoke first. "Eleanor, you look." He paused, his gaze moving across my coat, my bag, the house behind me. "Well, what are you doing here?" My mother stepped forward. There were more lines on her face now. Her hair was a careful shade of warm ash that didn't quite match her years. "We know about your son, Eleanor. We know you have a son." I looked at her. "We'd like to meet him," my father added. "We'd like to reconnect as a family." The sheer audacity of it very nearly made me laugh. 22 years of silence. 22 years of pretending I didn't exist. And now they were standing on my doorstep asking to meet a grandson they'd never once attempted to know. A grandson who did not exist. I let them in. I'm still not entirely sure why. Perhaps I needed to hear what 22 years of silence had actually led to. My father sat in my living room as though he were appraising a property, assessing the cornicing, the reclaimed wood flooring, the original artwork. My mother perched on the edge of my sofa, hands folded in her lap, spine perfectly straight. "Your anniversary," I said. "That's why you're here." 50 years. My father almost smiled. The 15th of November. "We're holding a celebration at the Midland Hotel. 200 guests. The Lord Mayor will be there, Reverend Pearson, the Rotary Club. The whole congregation. What does that have to do with me?" My mother exchanged the briefest look with my father. "There have been questions, Eleanor, about you, about what happened 22 years ago. People have long memories." "Some of our acquaintances remember that we had a third child," my father added. "They've been asking where you are. What became of you? We've always said you went traveling, that you built a life abroad, but the questions have become rather more persistent of late. So you need me to show up, play the happy family. We need your son." My mother's voice was firm. "We've told people about him, about our grandson. He should be there, representing the next generation of the Hartley family." The room went very still. "Who told you I have a son?" "The article." My father waved a dismissive hand. "That magazine piece. It mentioned your child, your company. You've done rather better than we anticipated." Rather better than we anticipated. As though my entire life had been a resit exam and I'd scrapped a pass. And if I refuse, my father's jaw tightened. He reached into his briefcase and set a blank check on my coffee table. "We're prepared to be generous, Eleanor. £250,000. You bring your son to the party, stay for 3 hours, take some photographs. Then you return to your life and we return to ours." I looked at the check, then at my mother, who was nodding as though this were the most reasonable arrangement in the world. £250,000, I repeated. "Is that the going rate for 22 years of silence? We're also prepared to reinstate you in the family estate." My mother leant forward slightly, lowering her voice as though sharing a confidence. "The combined value is just over £4 million. You would receive an equal share alongside Daniel and Rebecca." I thought about that bedsit above the laundrette in Salford. The evenings I'd worked until midnight while Poppy slept in a travel cot, in the corner of a client's empty kitchen, because I couldn't afford a childminder. The years of building, quietly and without any help, something that now belonged entirely to me. "And if I say no?" My father's expression hardened. "We would prefer not to reach out to your son directly, Eleanor, but if necessary, we could contact him ourselves. Explain the situation. Help him understand his family history. It was a threat. Understated, but unmistakable." "You want to contact my child," I said carefully, "and offer them your version of what happened. We want to be a family again," my mother said, opening her hands in a gesture of pure reasonableness. "Isn't that what you've always wanted?" I was about to respond when I heard footsteps on the stairs, and everything shifted. "Mum? Everything all right?" I heard voices. Poppy appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her psychology notes still in hand. She was in jogging bottoms and a University of Manchester hoodie. Her dark hair pulled up in a messy bun. She looked precisely what she was, a 21-year-old who'd been studying in her room. My mother rose to her feet, her expression cycling rapidly through confusion, calculation, and something very close to horror. "Who is this?" "This is Poppy." I moved slightly, positioning myself between my daughter and my parents. "My daughter. Your granddaughter." "Daughter?" My father's voice cracked. "But the article said, we thought, the article said child. You assumed the rest." Poppy's gaze moved from me to the two strangers in our sitting room. Something clicked behind her eyes. "These are them, aren't they?" Not a question. "The grandparents who threw you out when you were pregnant with me." My mother flinched. "That's not. It was far more complicated than—" "Which part was complicated?" Poppy crossed her arms. "The part where you threw a 17-year-old girl out into the rain, or the part where you spent 22 years pretending she'd never existed?" "Young lady." My father started. I'm not your young lady. I'm the grandchild you chose never to meet, the one you signed away in a legal document before I'd even drawn breath. Poppy's voice was composed, but her hands were trembling. I know everything. Mum never hid any of it from me. I've read the letter. I know about the inheritance papers. I know you told your friends she went traveling. My parents sat in stunned silence. Poppy looked at me. They came for a grandson, didn't they? Someone they could parade in front of their guests. Yes. She turned back to them with a quiet, cold smile. Surprise! My father recovered more quickly than my mother. I watched him recalibrate, the solicitor in him assessing this new variable with brisk efficiency. A granddaughter, he said carefully. Well, that works perfectly well. We can adjust the story. Adjust it to what? Poppy said. The secret granddaughter you've been hiding for 21 years? The daughter of the teenager you threw out on the street? We could say you were at school abroad, my mother offered, her voice taking on a pleading edge. Recently returned home. A wonderful surprise for the occasion. I was born in Salford. I've never left the country. I'm a second-year student at the University of Manchester. Poppy let out a short, humorless laugh. Do you hear what you're asking? You want me to lie to 200 people about my entire existence? The party is the 15th of November, my father said, glancing at his watch as though the schedule were the only thing that mattered. 10 days away, we need an answer by the 12th. I stood. I think you should go. Grace, my mother began, I'll consider what you've said, but not this evening, not with Poppy here. My mother gathered her handbag. At the door, she paused and turned back. This is a chance to heal, Eleanor, to put the past behind us. Don't let old wounds cost you your future. I watched them walk to their Mercedes, my father steering my mother into the passenger seat with the same practiced gesture I'd watched 1,000 times before, as though this were simply another unremarkable evening. When the car disappeared round the corner, Poppy spoke. You're not actually considering it. I looked at my daughter, this fierce, clear-eyed young woman I had raised on my own. The person Jeffrey and Patricia Hartley had tried to reduce to a clause in a legal document before she was even born. No, I said, but I'm not finished with them yet. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Have you ever stood where I stood that evening, facing people who abandoned you, only to reappear the moment they needed something from you? I'd genuinely love to know what you'd have done in my position. Drop a comment below. And if you want to see how this all unfolds, hit subscribe, because what happened next? Even I didn't see it coming. That night, after Poppy had gone to bed, I pulled a fireproof tin from the back of my wardrobe. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were the documents of my erasure, the notarized letter of disinheritance, dated the 17th of November 2002, signed by Jeffrey Allen Hartley and Patricia Rose Hartley, witnessed by a solicitor named Edmund Greer. I remembered the day it arrived, recorded delivery, requiring my signature, as though my father had wanted to be certain I knew exactly how thorough he'd been. The document was 4 pages of dense legal language, drawn up to ensure that Eleanor Catherine Hartley hereby relinquished all claims upon the Hartley family estate, and that the family bore no legal or moral obligation to the aforementioned party, or to any dependents thereof. Any dependents thereof. Poppy, reduced to 3 words in a legal document, erased before she'd taken a single breath. I photographed every page on my phone, uploaded them to cloud storage, made 2 separate backups. Mum, I looked up. Poppy was standing in the doorway in her dressing gown, her arms wrapped round herself. Couldn't sleep either. She sat beside me on the bed, looking at the documents laid out across the duvet. When she'd finished reading the first page, her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. They really did it, she whispered. They really just crossed you out like you were nothing. They did. What are you going to do with all of this? I looked at my daughter, at the evidence of 22 years of calculated cruelty spread across the bedspread between us. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But whatever I do, they won't be able to pretend any longer. Poppy nodded slowly. I might have an idea. The next morning, I made a call I hadn't made in over 2 years. Margaret Delaney answered on the third ring. Eleanor, is that you, love? Mrs. Delaney. I smiled despite everything. I hope I'm not ringing too early. At my age, early is all relative. What's wrong? You sound heavy. I told her about my parents' visit, the invented grandson, the anniversary party, the £250,000. When I'd finished, the line was quiet for a long moment. Those people, she finally said. 22 years and they haven't changed one bit. Mrs. Delaney, I need to ask you something. That night, November the 17th, 2002. What do you remember? I remember it like it was last week. Her voice took on an edge. Saw you through my sitting room window, standing in the rain with that little bag at your feet. Watched your parents' car reverse off the drive and go. I should have come out sooner. I've thought about that ever since. Do you still have your doorbell camera footage from that period? You had one of the early systems, didn't you? A pause. You know I never delete anything. Old teacher's habit. Document everything. Give me 20 minutes. 18 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an email. A grainy but entirely legible image. 17-year-old girl standing on a porch in the rain. The timestamp in the corner read 21:23. The 17th of November 2002. The Hartley family's front door was partially visible in the frame. That's you. Mrs. Delaney said when I rang her back, that's the night they sent you away. Would you be willing to verify this officially if it came to it? Love, I have been waiting 22 years for someone to ask me that. Her voice was fierce and certain. Whatever you need, I'm there. 2 pieces of evidence, 1 witness. Now I needed a plan. That evening, I went back through my own story. The Manchester Living article was still available online, shared nearly 15,000 times since it was published in the spring of 2022. The journalist, Harriet Shaw, had titled it, From Teen Mum to Design Director, Eleanor Hartley's Story. 2,800 words about loss, resilience, and building something lasting from the rubble of everything you thought you'd lost. I'd been careful in that interview. I told the truth, but not the whole truth. I mentioned the estrangement from my family without naming anyone or any city. I spoke about becoming a mother at 17 without identifying the parents who had cast me out. Not to protect them, but to protect Poppy from strangers making connections and dredging up pain that had never belonged to them. Now, scrolling through the comments, thousands of them. One caught my eye, posted just 3 weeks before my parents arrived at my door. Does anyone know if she's connected to the Hartley family in Manchester? The solicitors? Someone at my golf club mentioned it, and now I can't stop thinking about it. So that's how they'd found out. My phone rang. Vivian Cross, Eleanor. Word has reached me that your parents have suddenly materialized after 20-odd years of complete radio silence. I laughed despite myself. News travels. This is Manchester, darling. Everything travels. Her voice softened. What do you need? I'm not sure, yet perspective maybe. What I know, Vivian said, is that you've spent 22 years proving who you are entirely without them. Don't let 3 hours at their party unpick any of that. She was right, but I was already thinking considerably beyond 3 hours. Thursday, November the 7th, 2024. 3:45 in the afternoon. My phone showed a Manchester landline I didn't recognize. I nearly let it go to voicemail. Eleanor. It's Daniel. I hadn't heard my brother's voice in 22 years. It was deeper now, the voice of a man in his mid-40s rather than the 24-year-old who'd stood at an upstairs window watching me leave in the rain. Daniel, I know I have no right to ring. I know you have no reason whatsoever to listen to me. But before whatever happens next, there are things I need you to know. He exhaled unsteadily. Will you hear me out? Talk. The grandson story. That came entirely from Mum. She read your Manchester Living article 2 years ago, but she read it carelessly. Just saw the mention of a child in your company, and she constructed this whole narrative. A son, some sort of young entrepreneur continuing the Hartley name into the next generation. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. She told the church, the golf club, the Rotary lot. Built this entire fiction around your imaginary son, months of it. Dad went along with it. He always goes along with her. I sat very still. Why are you telling me this? Because I was a coward. He said it plainly, without flinching. 22 years ago, I should have come downstairs. I should have said something. I should have. He stopped, breathing carefully. Rebecca and I have talked about it for years. We were wrong. We have always been wrong. And now I want to do something right, if it's still possible. What does that look like to you? The anniversary party. Rebecca and I will both be there. If you decide to come, for whatever reason, you won't be walking in alone. He paused. There's something else you should know. The whole event is going to be live-streamed. Reverend Pearson's suggestion. A show of family unity for the congregation and their wider network. A live stream. 200 witnesses in person, and however many more watching from their sitting rooms. Thank you for telling me, Daniel. What are you going to do? I'm not certain yet, but I'm beginning to see it clearly. Friday, November the 8th, 2024, 10 past 10 in the morning. My father rang directly this time. No pleasantries. Eleanor, we are running out of time. The party is in a week. £250,000 and full reinstatement in the estate. Final offer. I've been speaking with Daniel. Silence. He told me about the grandson you've been telling people about. The one you invented from a magazine article you didn't read carefully enough. We may have elaborated slightly on certain details. You invented an entire person. You have been dining out on a fictional grandson for months. Eleanor. My father's voice hardened. I would appreciate a more respectful tone given everything we're offering. What exactly are you offering? Money to perform for your guests? A place in a trust you used to erase me? I kept my voice even composed. You're not offering me anything, Dad. You're trying to buy your way out of a lie you created. You have no right to judge us. You're the one who destroyed this family. You're the one who brought shame on us. I was 17 years old. The words came out quietly, with more force than any shouting. I was pregnant and frightened, and I needed my parents. And you threw me out like something you were embarrassed by, and spent 22 years pretending I'd moved abroad. If you don't attend this party, Eleanor, this is your last opportunity to be part of this family. You said that 22 years ago, and do you know what? I built a better life without you than I ever could have had with you. We shall see about that. He rang off. I sat in my office, heart loud in my chest, and thought clearly for the first time. 1 week, 200 guests, 1 live stream. It was time to stop letting them tell my story. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Poppy and Vivienne. A bottle of wine between us. They want a performance, Vivienne said. They want you to show up, smile for the cameras, and validate 22 years of lies. They want to use you, Poppy said. Same as they've always used you. Not someone to love, something to manage. I looked at the two of them, my mentor and my daughter, the family I had built for myself, person by careful person. I'm going to the party. Poppy's head came up sharply. Not to give them what they want, to give myself what I should have had years ago. I set my phone on the table, showing them the photographs of the disinheritance letter, Mrs. Delaney's security image, the Manchester Living article. They've spent 22 years controlling my story, telling people I went traveling, inventing a grandson, making me disappear, and I'm done disappearing. You want to undisappear yourself, Vivienne said slowly. I want to tell the truth, in front of everyone who matters to them, on their stage, at their party, during their live stream. I'm coming with you. Poppy's voice left no room for argument. They need to see who I actually am, not their imaginary grandson. Me. I reached across and took her hand. Are you certain? This could. I have spent my entire life knowing that my grandparents chose their reputation over my mother's well-being, and by extension over my existence. I am absolutely certain. I rang Daniel that night. Your offer, to stand with me, does that still hold? Rebecca and I talked again this afternoon. We're ready. Then I need one thing from you. Don't warn them I'm coming. Don't give them any indication. Can you manage that? Yes. Good. I looked out at the Manchester skyline through my office window, at the lights of the city I had made my own, because in 1 week we're going to show them what family actually means. Saturday, November the 15th, 2024. 10 to 7 in the evening. The grand ballroom at the Midland Hotel was everything my parents would have chosen. Chandeliers blazing with light, white linen pressed to perfection, flower arrangements that likely cost more than my first month's rent in Salford. 200 guests in black tie and evening gowns, clutching Prosecco flutes and discussing school catchment areas and second homes. I stood in the entrance with Poppy beside me. She wore a midnight blue dress, simple and elegant. I had chosen black, professional, precise, impossible to overlook. "All right," she murmured. "I'm about to walk into my parents' 50th anniversary party to tell 200 guests they've been lied to for 22 years. I squeezed her hand. I'm absolutely terrified. That's not what I asked. I looked at her, this extraordinary young woman who had grown up knowing her grandparents had tried to erase her and had chosen to become fierce rather than broken. "Yeah," I said. "I'm all right." We went in. The room was arranged around a raised dais at the far end, where my parents would address their guests. A camera crew was setting up the church's Facebook live stream. The recording light was already blinking steadily. And there they were, Jeffrey and Patricia Hartley, holding court on the dais, ringed by well-wishers and admirers. My mother in champagne-colored silk, my father in a well-cut dinner suit, both of them glowing with the particular confidence of people who believed they had won. They hadn't seen us yet. The room was too full, the attention too focused. But heads were already beginning to turn. Someone near the entrance murmured to their companion, Isn't that her? The one from the magazine?" The whispers moved through the room like a current through water. Then my mother looked up. My father had just begun his speech. 50 years of marriage has taught me that family is everything. Patricia and I have built our entire lives around that belief. Our children, our community, our faith. His voice carried across the ballroom, amplified and captured by the live stream. On a small monitor near the camera, I could see the Facebook comments scrolling already. "Beautiful couple. God bless the Hartley family. What an inspiration." My mother saw me first. Her champagne smile froze. I watched her hand tighten on my father's arm. He followed her gaze and stopped mid-sentence. The room noticed. Heads turned, murmuring built. Someone near the back, loudly enough to carry. "That's her. From the Living article. That's Jeffrey's daughter." Another voice. "I thought she was abroad. Hasn't been seen in years." My father recovered quickly. As I was saying, family has always been the... I started walking toward the dais. The crowd parted, not dramatically, not like a film scene, but steadily, people stepping aside because something in the air had changed and everyone could feel it. Poppy walked beside me, chin up, pace steady. Daniel appeared at the edge of the crowd, Rebecca beside him. Neither moved to stop me. They simply stood. "Grace?" My father's voice came through the microphone, strained now. What a surprise. We weren't. I climbed the 3 steps onto the dais. The live stream camera tracked me. I could feel 400 eyes on me, plus however many were watching online. "Hello, Dad." I took the microphone from his hand before he could react. "Hello, everyone." I turned to face the room. "My name is Eleanor Hartley. For those of you who don't know me, and I suspect many of you don't, I'm Jeffrey and Patricia's youngest daughter, the one they told you had gone traveling 22 years ago." The ballroom went absolutely silent. I didn't go traveling. On the 17th of November, 2002, 22 years ago tomorrow, my parents discovered I was pregnant at 17 years old. That same night, they threw me out of our family home. They had their solicitor draw up papers formally severing me from the family. They told me I was dead to them. A sharp intake of breath from somewhere in the room. They told everyone I'd gone abroad. For 22 years, they pretended I didn't exist. I reached into my bag and took out the notarized letter. This is the document my father posted to me, recorded delivery, 3 days after he threw me out. It states that I forfeit all inheritance rights, and that the Hartley family bears no obligation to me or, and I'm quoting directly, to any dependents thereof. I held it up toward the camera. "Those dependents? That's my daughter, Poppy." I turned slightly. Poppy stepped forward from the edge of the dais, composed and unflinching. Your granddaughter, the one you have never once attempted to meet. The room began to move, whispers becoming voices, becoming noise. The grandson you've been telling your friends about for months? He doesn't exist. You invented him from a magazine article you didn't bother to read carefully. My father reached for the microphone. Eleanor, this is not the appropriate time. When is the appropriate time, Dad? I held it out of his reach. When exactly would have been the right moment to tell the truth? I turned back to the room, to the 200 faces, to the camera, to the Reverend Pearson standing at the side of the dais with his hands clasped, watching intently. A week ago, my parents came to my house and offered me £250,000 to bring a fictional grandson to this party. £250,000 to make their lie look real. I didn't come here for money. I came here because I am done being erased. Reverend Pearson stepped forward. Jeffrey, is what your daughter is saying true? My father couldn't respond. My mother had begun to cry. I had seen Patricia Hartley cry once in my entire childhood, at her own mother's funeral. Now tears were running freely down her face, ruining the careful makeup she'd spent the morning applying. Jeffrey, the Reverend's voice was firm and quiet. I'm asking you a direct question. My father looked at the room, the Lord Mayor, the Rotary Club chairman, the church elders who had respected him for 30 years. I watched him search for the angle, the framing, the acceptable version of events. He couldn't find one. It was a very difficult period, he said finally. You threw me out because I was pregnant, because your reputation mattered more than your daughter. My voice stayed entirely calm. That's what happened. Daniel stepped onto the dais, then Rebecca. They stood beside me, not touching, but present and visible. She's telling the truth, Daniel said, his voice carrying without the microphone. Rebecca and I were there that night. We watched from the landing window while our parents put our 17-year-old sister out into the rain. We said nothing. We did nothing. That was our failure. The whispers became a roar. Mobile phones were coming out across the room. The Lord Mayor was already moving toward the exit. Mrs. Delaney, I said, gesturing toward the back of the room where a gray-haired woman stood, watching. She had flown in from Manchester that morning. Our neighbor from 22 years ago. She saw everything. She has photographs, timestamps. Margaret Delaney stood a little straighter, her chin lifted. I watched that girl stand in the rain for 10 minutes before she walked away. I gave her a roof over her head and never once received a telephone call from the Hartley family asking where she'd gone. The live stream comments were moving faster than anyone could read them. If you've ever wondered what it looks like when everything a person has spent 50 years constructing comes apart in 3 minutes of truth, I can tell you. I watched it happen. Hit that like button if you think they deserved it, and keep watching, because what happened next surprised even me. I handed the microphone back to my father. He took it, reflexively, like a man moving through deep water. I didn't come here to destroy you, I said, quietly enough that only those on the dais could hear. I came here to stop being invisible. Then I raised my voice for the room. I'm not asking for your sympathy. I don't need it. 22 years ago, I was thrown out with nothing. Today, I run a design firm in Manchester. 24 staff members, over £4.5 million in annual revenue. My daughter is in her second year at the University of Manchester. We built our lives without the Hartley family's involvement or their money. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because my parents tried to purchase my silence last week, and they deserve to face the consequences of what they did. Not in private, but in front of the community they value above their own children. Poppy took the microphone from me with steady hands. I'm Poppy, the granddaughter they never wanted. She looked out at the room clearly. I'm 21 years old. I have known my whole life that my grandparents chose their reputation over my mother, and by extension, over me. She turned and looked directly at Jeffrey and Patricia Hartley. You could have known me. You could have been there when I took my first steps and sat my GCSEs and got my A-level results. You could have been at my graduation ceremony next year. Her voice cracked only slightly. You chose not to be, and that was never, not once, our fault. Poppy handed back the microphone and stepped down from the dais. I followed. Behind us, the ballroom erupted. At the doors, I turned back one final time. One more thing. My voice cut through the noise. I am not going to take any legal action. I'm not going to contest the estate or make any financial demands. The papers my parents signed 22 years ago. I'm keeping them. As a record of who they are, not as a weapon. I held my father's gaze across the room. But if you ever spread lies about me or my daughter again, if you attempt to contact Poppy without her consent, or construct some new story for your circle about where we've been, every document I have will become public. The disinheritance letter, the photographs, the timestamps, and now, I looked across the sea of faces, 200 witnesses to this conversation. Vivian Cross appeared at my side. Ready? Yes. As we walked through the doors into the November night, I heard Reverend Pearson's voice behind us. Jeffrey, Patricia, I think we need to speak privately. The air outside was cold and clean and sharp. Poppy slipped her hand into mine as we walked toward the car. Mum. Her voice was small. Did we do the right thing? I thought about the 17-year-old girl standing in the rain with a hold all and a baby she hadn't planned for. I thought about every year of building, of surviving, of becoming someone worth being. We told the truth, I said. We drew a line. We let them face what they chose. I pulled her into my arms. That's not revenge. That's justice. What happens now? I looked up at the Manchester sky, orange with city light. Now we go home. The fallout began within hours. By midnight, the live stream clip had been shared more than 900 times. By morning, that number had quadrupled. Someone had clipped the key moments, captioned them, and uploaded them separately, where they gathered 50,000 views in the first 36 hours. Someone else had titled the full recording, Woman Exposes Parents' 22-Year Lie at Their Golden Anniversary Party. 43 guests left the Midland Hotel within 30 minutes of our departure. I know this because Daniel rang me on Sunday morning with a meticulous account. The Lord Mayor left without saying goodbye to Dad. The Rotary Club chairman followed. The Hendersons, you probably don't remember them. They own the car dealerships up in Cheshire. They actually apologized to me on their way out. Said they should have asked questions years ago. By Sunday afternoon, a brief item had appeared online in the Manchester Evening News. Anniversary celebration at the Midland ends with unexpected family confrontation. The piece was carefully neutral. The comments below it were not. I've known the Hartleys for years through the golf club. I had absolutely no idea. Jeffrey Hartley prepared my mother's will. I'm ringing his office first thing Monday to change firms. Anyone who watched that live stream will never look at that family the same way again. By Monday, Jeffrey had tendered his resignation from the church's lay committee. Personal reasons, said the notice. Everyone understood. By Wednesday, the Law Society's Professional Standards Division had reportedly received 2 letters from former clients, and through all of it I was in Manchester, answering client emails. 8 new project inquiries came in that week. People who'd seen the Manchester Living article 2 years ago and had only now connected it to the video spreading across their feeds. Some fallouts destroy. Others clarify. Mine did both. The following Thursday, Harriet Shaw from Manchester Living rang. Eleanor, I don't suppose you've seen, but the footage is everywhere now. We'd love to do a follow-up piece. The director who faced her passed. Would you consider it? I thought for a moment. Let me come back to you. Of course, just so you know, the response has been extraordinary. People are connecting with your story who've never encountered interior design in their lives. She wasn't wrong. The company's general inbox had been flooded with messages that had nothing to do with a kitchen renovation or a sitting room refresh. Your video made me ring my sister for the first time in 9 years. I was a teenage mum, too. Watching you made me feel like something other than a cautionary tale. Thank you for showing that the best answer to people who tried to erase you is to simply refuse to disappear. The Saturday after the party, Daniel and Rebecca came to Manchester for the first time in 22 years. I hadn't planned it as a milestone. It simply happened. We sat in my sitting room, the same room where my parents had laid a check on my coffee table and called it a reunion, and talked for nearly 7 hours. Daniel told me about the years of guilt. Rebecca cried when she met Poppy properly, face to face for the first time. Their children, a boy of 9 and a girl of 12, ran around my garden while the adults tried to understand what it might mean to rebuild something from this much rubble. "I know sorry isn't enough," Daniel said. "I know it doesn't account for 22 years. "No," I agreed, "it doesn't. But it's a start." Poppy watched from the kitchen doorway. This young woman who had grown up without any extended family at all, quietly taking in what it might feel like to have one. Complicated, imperfect, arriving 2 decades late, but real. 1 week after the party, my phone rang with a Manchester number. My mother, Eleanor. Her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it, diminished. "I'm not ringing to apologize. I don't know how to apologize for what we did. I'm not sure I know how to begin." "Then why are you ringing?" A long silence. "I've watched the video. The live stream footage. I've watched it 14 times. A pause. "I keep looking at your face while you're speaking, trying to see my daughter. The one eye." She didn't finish the sentence. I said nothing. "Your father is. He's struggling. The firm. The church. His colleagues. People are looking at him differently and he doesn't know how to manage it. I didn't do this to punish him. Or you. I know. I know that now." Her voice broke. "You did it because we gave you no choice. You did it because you had to stop letting us pretend." "Why did you ring, Mum?" The longest pause yet. "Because I wanted to hear your voice. Because I haven't heard it in 22 years, and I realized." Watching that recording, watching your daughter stand up there and say what she said, that I might simply never hear it again. She was crying now, because my granddaughter stood on that stage and told 200 people she'd grown up knowing we didn't want her. And I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe, Eleanor. I closed my eyes. "I'm not ready to forgive you," I said. "I may never be. But I'm not going to hang up on you. That's more than I deserve." "Yes, it is." We stayed on the line for another minute, neither of us speaking. Then she said goodbye. She didn't ask for another chance. She didn't demand anything at all. Perhaps that was progress. Or perhaps it was simply the first small step on a very long road that might lead nowhere. I honestly didn't know. And for once, I found I could sit with that uncertainty without it swallowing me whole. Christmas, 2024. My dining table. The one I'd bought 3 years before from an estate sale in Stockport, and stripped and restained myself. Seated 13. It had never held this many people before. Poppy sat at my right hand. Vivian at my left. Mrs. Delaney, who had come up from Manchester's south side for the occasion, was teaching my nephew how to fold a napkin into a swan. Daniel was carving the turkey while his wife arranged the roasting dishes. Rebecca's children were arguing cheerfully over who got to carry in the pudding. My parents weren't there. We hadn't reached that point. I wasn't certain we ever would. But looking around that table, at the people who had chosen to be there, who wanted to know me, not some carefully curated version of me, not a prop for their narrative, but actually me, I understood something I'd been circling for 22 years. I had spent 2 decades mourning a family that had never truly wanted me. I had spent those same 2 decades, without fully realizing it, building one that did. Poppy stood to make a toast. She unfolded pieces of paper she'd written on earlier. "When I was little, I used to ask Mum why I didn't have grandparents like the other kids at school. She always told me the truth, that they'd made a choice, and that the choice wasn't about me. It took me a long time to really understand what she meant." She looked at me across the table. "But I understand now, and I know that everything I have, every good thing I am, is because she never let their choice define us. She never let it define her." She raised her glass. "To the family we build, not the one we're handed." Everyone drank. Later, after the mince pies and the washing up and the gradually dispersing guests, I stood at the kitchen window watching the last of the winter light go. Poppy appeared beside me, mug of tea in each hand. "All right? I looked at my daughter. At this life I had assembled, carefully and stubbornly, from the ruins of everything I once thought I'd lost. Yeah, I said, I really am. If you're still with me, let me leave you with this. 22 years ago, I was a frightened 17-year-old standing in the rain watching my parents' taillights disappear down the road. I thought my life was over. I thought I had nothing. I was wrong. I had Jamie, for as long as I was lucky enough to have him. I had Mrs. Delaney, who opened her door at 10 o'clock at night, because it was the right thing to do. I had Vivienne, who saw something worth investing in when I had nothing to offer but stubbornness and an eye for a room. I had Poppy, who grew up knowing the truth and chose to be fierce instead of bitter. And I had myself, the version of me who eventually stopped asking for permission to take up space. If you are somewhere in your life where your family makes you feel as though you need to make yourself smaller to be acceptable, where your worth feels entirely dependent on their approval, I understand that more than I can say. I have lived it. But here is what I know now. You do not need their permission to know your own value. Drawing a boundary is not revenge. It is how you survive, and sometimes the family you build, the people who choose you, deliberately and repeatedly, is the strongest thing you will ever have. My parents still haven't truly apologized. Not in any way that reaches deep enough to mean something. My father has barely spoken publicly since the party. My mother rings occasionally, and I answer when I can. Daniel and Rebecca are trying. We are all, in our own ways, trying. But I am not waiting for them to become different people before I allow myself to live. I am living. In the life I built, the life I earned, the life that belongs entirely to me. That isn't a tidy ending. But it's a true one. And true endings don't require applause. They only require honesty. Thank you for listening to Serene Drama Stories. If this meant something to you, if it made you feel a little less alone, please share it, leave a like, subscribe, and check the description for more stories just like this one. Because everyone deserves to be seen.